Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, climate action is becoming a key priority for many businesses, but sometimes business owners are unsure about where to start or if they can free up the resources to make it happen. My next guest, Paul Murphy from Climeaction, is helping businesses in Ireland and the US to develop solutions to reduce their carbon footprint using its FAST methodology. Paul joins us now to discuss the business and the growth which it has achieved. But Paul, how did the acquisition of your previous employer by a fossil fuel company inspire you to start Climeaction?
When you spend your entire career all the way through college and your engineering career trying to reduce emissions and take actions to mitigate the effects of climate change, when your employer is bought out by a fossil fuel company, it makes you think, and it makes you think, well, why am I doing this? You can't be, I suppose, trying to reduce emissions on one hand and selling LPG out to the other side of the business. So for me, that was the reason why I finished up in that business and started Climeaction.
So what services does Climeaction provide to its clients?
So what we do at Climeaction is we are a one-stop shop for making businesses better. So we've categorized our services into two categories. One is climate. So climate is our first and our primary service because we believe that the climate, there's currently a climate emergency, so every business should be working on climate issues now. So across that, we work on everything from energy, carbon, energy management, looking at water, waste, management systems, all of that type of thing. And then the other area of our business then is responsible business. So these are, I suppose, the other areas that maybe are not so urgent in many respects, but looking at corporate reporting, compliance, improving your ESG performance, or becoming a B Corp.
And how does Climeaction differentiate itself from other organisations working in climate action?
Very simply, we're probably the only company in Ireland which can deliver actionable results when it comes to carbon emissions reduction across a business's full scope of their emissions. So when we look at a dairy company as an example, we're working with a dairy company from farm to fork. Most of our competitors are only still working inside the four walls of the factory, whereas we're looking at the whole picture right across the full supply chain.
And how is success measured on those projects?
We measure success in two ways. So we have to save carbon in everything that we do, and it has to save money. If it doesn't do both, we don't do it. To measure success for us as a company, we actually track our impact through carbon savings identified and delivered. And to date, we're on track to actually have identified over 3% of Ireland's national emissions as a company, just ourselves, across our client base. So, like when you talk about impact, a small team of 35 people, and we're already at that stage where we've identified 3% of the whole country's emissions reduction.
And whilst SMEs and micro businesses may be interested in reducing their energy usage and carbon footprint, do you find that they do not have the resources they need to action such commitments?
Yeah, so the key challenge for SME businesses, in our opinion, it's not necessarily the finance or the money to do it, it's time. So if you take a traditional consulting engagement that we would have with a large company, though, like we're working with, teams of people that are dedicated resources to deliver the results that large company needs. But when you work with an SME company, you could be working with the business owner or the general manager or, someone that it's part of their job within the business. And when you look at what an SME company has to do from a regulatory and a compliance perspective, and even in dealing with their customers, which may be large companies, the amount of work and time that's involved is quite significant. We're actually trying to solve that at the moment through the launch of our ESG Go digital tools, which turns what usually would have taken 2 to 5 days for a consultant working with a company to do into a 2 to 3 hour job for the SME company that they can do it themselves.
So typically when you engage with a client, what process do you bring them through?
We have a very simple process, so we call it the FAST program. So regardless of if you are one of the largest life sciences companies in the world, or whether you are a small restaurant in Wexford, we bring them through the same process, and it's called the FAST program. So F is for footprint. We understand the baseline footprint of the business across their scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. We develop a baseline understanding of their ESG maturity. So for SMEs, we do that through our ESG Go digital tool. For large industry, we do it through our expert consulting. We then develop an audit, which is the A part of the FAST program. And that audit identifies opportunities for improvement across their scope 1 and 2 emissions, or their energy, and across their supply chain, which is their scope 3 emissions. So if we're working with a business, we'll just say an SME business, we'd likely identify maybe 20 to 30 opportunities for improvement. For a large company, on a single site, it could be 150. We recently worked with one large company, and they had 10 sites in Ireland, and it was over 1,000 opportunities. But when you have all those ideas and opportunities for improvement, how do you know what to do next? So that brings us to the next place, which is strategy. So we look at the company's goals, the company's budgets, look at what their competitors are doing, and then we develop all those opportunities into a step-by-step strategy to help them to achieve their results. And then the final piece is training. So training is a long lead time item. So if you're looking at how your team are going to be able to deliver on the strategy, you need to understand the training that they'll need to be able to implement it. So we identify their training needs in advance, so that when you actually go to implement your strategy, your team are ready for it.
And in terms of financial supports, do you believe that there's enough of financial incentives and supports available to businesses here in Ireland by government agencies?
To be honest, there's almost too many of them at the moment. So if you look at companies in Ireland, the amount of grant programs that are available through, whether it's the local enterprise office, the Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, Údarás na Gaeltachta, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, they're almost falling over each other trying to give money to companies and support them. And that's fantastic. We know the money and the budget is there and it's all available to companies. Where I see the biggest challenge at the moment is the grant schemes are very difficult to administer, and they're very difficult because there's so many of them and they're so complex, and they're very difficult to actually get for many companies. So we've had experiences there of companies who wanted to act and who wanted to invest money and wanted to do projects, but they could be waiting a year and a half for a grant to be approved because the complexity of it and the administrative challenges that the government agencies have in delivering them. My opinion is that all grants should actually be scrapped and replaced with a rebate scheme, which will be based on carbon savings, and that would really simplify the whole approach, because at the moment it's just not working.
Talk to us about the support which Enterprise Ireland and the Davy EIS Fund have provided.
Yeah, so the Davy EIS Fund invested €2.3 million into us in December of last year. That's been invaluable to us in allowing us to scale. As a business, since we started, we've been profitable and we've been growing organically. So we grew to a team of 17 organically and had, good profits. But when you're looking at, I suppose, the more braver moves like our recent expansion to Boston, developing digital tools, Enterprise Ireland then have been invaluable in helping to connect us with the international network, particularly here in Boston, where I am, and across the US. And in supporting us in other areas, funding for graduate hires, but also looking at potentially funding some of our digital R&D as well, which will be fantastic.
You're speaking to me live from Boston this morning, but apart from that, what else is included in your overall international expansion plans for Climeaction over the coming years?
Within the next 18 months, we plan to have another 5 offices at various different locations across US territories. The next of those is likely going to be in Puerto Rico, and that will probably be in the early part of 2025. And that really what that will do is will give us a good foundation to scale the business across multiple different state economies here in the US, but also give us coverage across what is probably one of the biggest markets for our services at a point where it's really only emerging. So we'd be hoping to be a key player in this market when it gets to a mature stage.
And in terms of your expansion across the US over the coming years, who are going to be your target market and how are you going to get scale with them?
So our target market is the large manufacturing sector. High energy, high process intensive manufacturers that use a lot of raw materials. And that's because they have the biggest carbon footprint. So the key sectors we look at are the life sciences sector, food, dairy and beverage sectors, power generation, and also the semiconductor and automotive sectors as well. We're working with many of them already. So we've worked with over 400 companies, actually 440 companies since we started. Of our businesses, we started about 70 to 80% of our business now is in that large industrial space. And we've been working with a lot of those companies in what we call Kickstarter projects. So we're just starting on the journey with them. But those programs are now being rolled out across different geographies and moving to implementation phases. So if you imagine as a business consulting, our first job with a factory make maybe 30 to 50,000 euro of a fee. As we go to move to implementation phase, they could be spending many multiples of millions of euro between now and 2030, and we would partner with them on that. But if you look at an Irish single site, for example, and then you look at some of our global clients, they could have 20, 50, 100 sites around the world. As we demonstrate success in Ireland, then we get brought to their other sites globally, and that's what has driven us to the US as well, is our customers are asking us to be here.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Paul Murphy from Climeaction, and I wish Paul and the team every success with gaining traction in the US market.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.